of bhakti, different stages of bhakti. And they're called showers, or vrishti, because it's a rain cloud. So this is the second shower. The first stage of growth of bhakti once the seed is planted. So the seed was planted through devotees. They said the Madhyamadikari is the one who plants the seed of bhakti. And then it begins to grow. So in Sadhana Bhakti, we have two qualities manifesting. These are covered in the Nectar devotion also. 6 qualities of bhakti are there. The first 2 manifest in Sadhana Bhakti, the second 2 in Bhava Bhakti, and the last 2 in Prem Bhakti. 6 qualities. Sadhana Bhakti manifests 2 qualities, Kleshagni and Subhada. Kleshagni means destruction of suffering and the causes of suffering. Subhada means the appearance of good qualities. So we have a negative and a positive element here. So, according to yoga, Patanjali, there are 5 causes of suffering. The most subtle or the original cause is avidya, or ignorance. Ignorance means mistaking one thing for another. So we mistake the impermanent body for permanent. We mistake something in the material world which is full of misery to be full of bliss. We mistake things which aren't the self to be the self, etc. So it's all illusion, avidya. And that's the original cause. Then we got asmita, which means thinking oneself falsely, false ego in other words, ahankara, identifying ourselves with the body as a result of the ignorance. And as a result of that we get raga, attachment to certain objects and attachment to certain types of happiness in the material world. And we get the counterpart of that, dvesha, or hatred. We do not like certain objects, or we hate certain objects because they don't give the happiness, or they give the opposite, which we call pain, or unhappiness. The final result is abhinivesh. We develop a longing to cling to our particular life to get our happiness and destroy our suffering, etc. And we fear death. So these are the 5 causes of suffering. Like that. So under avidya we have false identity, attraction, repulsion, absorption, and then we do activities in the material world and we get karma. And karma gives suffering. So in Nectar devotion he simply analyzes avidya, bija, which is the desire, like raga, and then karma. Karma itself is divided into 4 sections: aparabdha, rudha, bija, and prarabdha. Aparabdha is the most subtle. You don't experience it in this lifetime. Prarabdha, you experience in this lifetime. The other 2 are in between stages. So the rudha can be grouped with the aparabdha, and the bija with the prarabdha. Like that. So any particular act will give a result in the future, but it won't manifest immediately. It may take 1 birth or 2 births or 5 births or 10 births. Until it manifests in one lifetime, it is aparabdha and rudha. And when it begins to manifest in this lifetime, it becomes bija and prarabdha. So, the first 2 stages you will not detect at all, because it's for future lifetimes. The last 2 are this lifetime. Prarabdha means now you experience. Bija means somewhere else in this lifetime, future of this lifetime experience. So it is not as subtle as the first 2 stages, because it's somewhat detectable in this lifetime. So sometimes people have premonitions of future disaster or whatever in their life, accident or whatever. So that's the bija operating. Its presence isn't known, and then it will become prarabdha at a certain point in time due to karma. So, and what does bhakti do? Bhakti removes all of these. Avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesh, action, karma, suffering. All levels of suffering from the... This gives the suffering, and then we go backwards all the way up to avidya. So all of that is removed by the process of bhakti. Huh? So, that's what the negative aspect, what it removes. Then it also produces something. In itself, that removal of all that other stuff is not so significant. If we were simply to remove everything up to avidya, we would get liberation only. So in itself, that this removal of sin and karma, etc., is not so significant. Because with jnana also you end up with that result, or yoga you can end up with that result also. So that's not what's so unique. There is a unique feature here in that jnana will not claim to remove the prarabdha karmas. So whatever you're stuck with in this lifetime remains in spite of your jnana. Only when you give up your body, then you get free from your prarabdhas also. Where bhakti says even you get rid of your prarabdhas now. Huh? The counter argument would be, well, your body is a prarabdha karma, and if you take to bhakti, how come you still have a body? You should leave your body immediately if all your prarabdhas are destroyed. So the answer to that is that there is no prarabdha. Even for ajami or anybody like that, technically there is no prarabdha even for namavas. But the body's there. Why? So that is not really karma. It's the will of the Lord. Yeah. It's a shadow of karma, kept there by the Lord. So it's not real karma as such. Okay, so we have subhada, bestowing auspiciousness. So subha means qualities, but it means spiritual qualities. But because if you were to get material qualities, it would be a cause of bondage, and you're back into all these things, asmita, etc. So development of qualities means spiritual qualities, not material qualities. And one becomes disinterested in material affairs, etc. We saw that Kleshagni removed desires, etc. So one becomes disinterested in material activities, etc. And interest in the Supreme Lord begins to manifest. So these are opposites. Attachment to material enjoyment, attachment to the Supreme Lord. They're opposites. So the more we engage in bhakti, the more we become disinterested in matter, and the more we become attached to the Supreme Lord. And then automatically those two things happen together. And qualities like mercy, forgiveness, truthfulness, simplicity, etc., all these qualities begin to manifest. But these are not sattvic qualities which people manifest in the material world and cultivate in sattva gun. They're not the same thing. In Nectar Devotion, Rupa Goswami says cultivating good qualities is not an anga of bhakti. We don't try to cultivate good qualities. Because then you're stuck in the sattva gun as a result. So these qualities manifest spiritually as a result of bhakti. So when it says the devotee is simple, truthful, etc., 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 we're not supposed to cultivate qualities like that artificially. We're supposed to cultivate bhakti, which will manifest these qualities. That's all. So therefore we should be very careful. Some people preach like that. We have to develop all these nice qualities like this, but actually it's not so. Of course, it also doesn't mean that let us do all sorts of sinful activities and wait for bhakti to develop our good qualities. We can't do that either. So we do have to have some standards and minimum and try to control the senses, but the force of bhakti itself will manifest qualities. So we're planting the seed of bhakti and we're getting subhada and kleshakti manifesting in sadhana bhakti. So it starts with shraddha, or faith. In the Bhakti Sandarbha, there Jiva Goswami distinguishes faith from bhakti. So faith is only an inclination towards the Lord. It becomes bhakti when we actually decide to act upon that inclination and do something, such as the angas of bhakti, etc. Then it becomes bhakti. But it is the basis of the bhakti. Without that inclination to the Lord, if we do the activity, it's not called bhakti. So you can hear, chant, remember, it's not necessarily bhakti if you don't have faith. So in other words, if you're doing bhakti for some other reason, not for surrender to the Lord, then it's not actually bhakti. Even if you hear and chant, remembering, all these things, it's not bhakti actually. So it's based upon that inclination towards the Lord. That inclination is not mental. Because mind keeps changing all the time. So where does bhakti reside? Primarily in the Atma, not in the mind, intelligence, ego, etc. In the Atma. So the inclination of Shraddha is a change in the Atma itself. The Jiva changes its inclination. When that takes place a little bit, then that is called Shraddha. Enough to be conscious, and it's called Shraddha. The cause of that, of course, is mercy of devotees. Madhyamadikaris give some mercy, birth after birth after birth. The person has no faith, therefore he will not look for devotees. So only accidentally he gets association, and he doesn't even want to accept it, but somehow it affects him. It affects the jiva, the atma. Birth after birth that happens until it becomes shraddha. Then it becomes conscious. When it becomes a conscious element, then he uses his body, mind, words, etc., and he will seek out sadhu sanga, association of devotees. Then he begins Bhajana kriya, activities of bhakti, hearing, chanting, remembering. So that is actual bhakti at that point. After the shraddha, when we get sadhu sanga, then we get actual performance of bhakti. The first stage is called anishtata, which means unsteady. Talk about faith again. Shraddha. So that shraddha is manifested as faith in Scripture. We have an inclination towards the Lord. What is its manifestation as far as devotee is concerned? We accept what Scripture says. Scripture says, Bhagavad Gita will say, you're not the body, you're the soul. Soul of servant of Krishna. So we accept that. We don't argue with it. So that's our faith. We accept the verdict of Scripture. Which Scripture? The Bhakti Scriptures. Those things which are dedicated to the Supreme Lord. Once we accept the principle of the Scripture, Scripture also gives us instructions on what to do. In other words, Scripture defines truth in terms of Jiva, Supreme Lord, material energy, etc. It's the Sambandha Gyan. It defines a process and a goal. These are all defined. So with faith we accept all that and we don't argue with it. Then the Scripture will tell us the process to get to the goal. So Shraddha means we accept the Scripture and we also accept the process. That is the process of Bhakti Yoga. So these types of faith may arise naturally or suddenly. Naturally meaning over time, and that is association and accidental mercy, birth after birth, and suddenly in this lifetime it gradually begins to manifest. Or suddenly a person may manifest some great faith for some reason or other. What this means is either great mercy suddenly, or actually there were some previous blocks and suddenly one becomes free of those blocks and it manifests, but it was actually there in previous lifetime. Okay. So sadhu sanga means taking shelter of spiritual master, guru, devotees, etc. And the person with faith and then inquires what to do. What is the action we should do? Which is in scripture, of course. But then he asks the devotee what to do. So in other words, it's not just the book. We have instances of people just reading books and starting to practice bhakti. Like in, I think, Mongolia, somebody got some books. There was no devotees there. Like, read the book, they became interested, so they started chanting and doing all sorts of things. Completely independent. Of course, we don't know if they're chanting properly, even because they didn't have any examples of devotees to how to chant on the beads or anything. So they started chanting and everything. Generally, it requires some devotee there to guide the person, so they do it properly. Yeah? In other words, maybe they're chanting with their left hand, or we don't know. Or maybe they're not using beads at all. They're chanting in the mind, because sometimes we just read the book and it says chant Hare Krishna, so they start chanting in their mind or whatever. So we don't know. But so you take shelter of devotees and they give you all the details of exactly how to do things properly. Not just book. Okay. Then that person takes instruction and he understands the value of association, sadhu sanga. So there's different types of sadhu sanga, association with devotees. With equals, one associates as friend. So equal interchange ideas. Superiors, then one takes shelter of them. In other words, one follows their instructions. If it's inferior, then one gives instructions. And if they're not devotees, you avoid them. If they're neutral, you can preach to them. So there's different modes of conduct for a devotee and in relation to other types of devotees. So as I mentioned, that sadhu sanga leads to the Bhajana kriya, and we have two types, anishtha and nishtha, unsteady and steady. So generally, it starts as anishtha and then it leads to steady. In very rare cases, we just go to Shraddha Sadhu Sangha Nishtha also, but usually it goes to an anishtha stage. So anishtha bhakti has symptoms. False confidence. Utsahamai. Utsaha, of course, is a good quality. It means enthusiasm and the nectar of instruction. And be enthusiastic and optimistic about the getting some results in bhakti. But here utsahamai means it's a negative thing, and it's a false sense of confidence. In other words, the person who begins bhakti feels that he is at a very high platform when he's at a very low platform. So now that he's a devotee, he will look down on everybody else as being inferior, and all the karmis are rascals and everything like this. And he's almost at their level, but he will consider everybody else to be like rascals and everything like that. And other devotees also he'll consider himself high or equal to them, even he's not. So that's utsahamai, false position. Thinking, because of course he is very fortunate, he is higher than everybody else in the material world because he's taken to bhakti, but he should not falsely elevate himself. So that's one thing. Other is the sporadic endeavor. Sometimes we do very nicely, sometimes we don't have any inclination to do it all. Sometimes enthusiastic, sometimes not enthusiastic, like this, up and down. Often controlled by circumstances. Bad circumstances, then we've got enthusiastic. When it's good association, then we get enthusiastic again. So we go up and down because we cannot control the circumstances in all cases. The Sanskrit is gana tarara. Tarara means very thin, gana means very intense. So sometimes very intense bhakti, sometimes very dilute bhakti. And so it's inconstant endeavor. Indecision, or called vyuda vikalpa, which means we make all sorts of decisions about everything, aspirations, but we keep switching. So one day we may think it's good to take sannyas, another day it's good to be a grihastha, another day this, that, we keep switching our goals all the time. So we don't really have any firm determination. We switch around all the time. That's called Juda Vikalpa. Oops. Can't see it much. Vishaya Sangra, which means war with Vishaya, material attractions. A struggle with Maya. So, this struggle means sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Sometimes the senses overcome you and you take to sense gratification. Sometimes you win and you control your senses, like this. So this is Anishtita person. Sometimes he does what he should do, sometimes he doesn't do what he should do. He does the opposite. Struggle. Niyama akshama, which means inability to hold vows. These are the positive vows we have. Of course, we have 4 regular principles, etc. We have other vows like chanting 16 rounds, etc. So many things. Or you make some vow. I'll read 1 hour scripture a day, or so many things. But then the Anishtita person doesn't actually maintain that vow. He makes a vow, and then 2 days later he's broken it. He stops decreasing his rounds or whatever, or he doesn't read or whatever. So he makes vows and then breaks the vows. And enjoying the waves. Taranga Rangani. The waves are the waves of material enjoyment. So these waves, something like Vishaya Sangara, of course, but the waves are actually the benefits that one gets due to following bhakti. So when one does bhakti, then naturally bhakti becomes a servant. Bhakti and mukti are servants of bhakti. So therefore, one will get opportunities for material enjoyment, for followers, so many things. So if you begin enjoying those things, that's called Taranga Rangani. To enjoy the results that you get from bhakti, and the material effects, that is, that arise. So these manifest in the Anishtita devotee. What this means is that he still becomes attracted to material things, and his spiritual influence is weak, so therefore he cannot follow the vows properly. So there's a struggle there. Okay, so anyway, we have the mercy of Lord Chaitanya to protect us from that Anishtita stage. So that's the second one. Next. Okay, so now we're at the third shower.